with Sky Civic, and today we're starting the first of our conversations with chatbot builders and industry experts in government, talking about this technology and the ways that it can solve issues that citizens are facing and help streamline government processes. Today, I'm speaking with Collin Rainey. He is a contractor working for the state of Indiana in the INBiz department. And I will let you take a little bit, talk a little bit more about yourself, what you've done, and then we'll jump into discussing the chatbot that you built.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me on your video podcast. So I'm Collin. Like you said, I'm a contractor with the state of Indiana, and particularly I am over customer experience for all of INBiz. So it means a lot of things, but primarily it meant the call center, and we were realizing that because our call center is open during business hours, we were missing a lot of calls. And we were also serving a section of the customer population, or we were missing serving a customer population that really just needed quick answers and something to get over a hump to keep going on with the process. And so that's really where the chatbot started to become more and more sensible. And we thought, well, this could be a good idea. We saw a great use case with the Montana Department of Motor Vehicles, and it just became a natural fit. So for folks who don't know what INBiz is a one-stop business portal for Hoosiers looking to start a business in the state of Indiana. You can form a business, you can connect with the Department of Revenue, Department of Workforce Development, professional licensing. We're adding features constantly, but we're trying to kind of become the TurboTax and Amazon of business. We're trying to do business with the state of Indiana. So we had the call center for a long time, added email in a very small capacity, and then chatbot was added, and it just took off from there. It's been performing pretty well, actually. We just came up on a year.
Awesome. Yeah, that's always a good anniversary to hit. That first year feels good to make it to the first year and really sit back and take a look at the landscape of how it's evolved, and we'll talk more about that. But first, you kind of touched on it, but I want to get really clear and from your perspective, what problem were you trying to solve with chatbots? You mentioned that the call center wasn't open, or it only had business hours, and you're missing out on a lot of customer queries and stuff like that. But if you could jump in a little more detail to the problem that really existed that you were addressing.
Yeah. So I'll take, I mentioned different customer types, right? So when you talk about business owners, it's kind of easy to think of, I'm Collin and I'm going to open a donut shop and I need a place to conduct business with the state. And that's definitely a use case for INBiz. But you got a lot of other users who, maybe like the big corporations here in town who have thousands of employees. They need to use INBiz to conduct business with the state, all the way down to truck drivers who may not even have a computer that they use to run their business. So how do we provide information to them? So, and this is true with any broad-reaching customer service department. We kind of had to think of ways to meet each of these needs. And really the only channel we had for customer service when I arrived at INBiz was the call center. So that's great. You spend 3 minutes reaching somebody, they give you the answer you need, and you move on. But the total interaction time could take 5 minutes. What we saw with chatbot is, hey, there's a need for folks who don't need the whole process explained to them, or fairly tech savvy, can mostly get along, but just need help kind of interpreting the government ease that's on these forms and workflows, or just need to be pointed in the right direction and take the ball from there. So it drops an interaction that could take 5 minutes and you wait on hold to, I think, under 30 seconds, you can get an answer now for one of our top business transactions. So we were missing an ability to help those customers. Secondly, we were missing an ability to help customers after hours. Our call center is open during standard business hours, but if you're working the second shift and you're getting off and realizing, hey, I just want to start my own business, I can't do this anymore, your time to work on forming that business is after hours. So the chatbot was there too as a way to kind of answer some simple questions, get people over to where they needed to be. And then the third issue we were facing, chatbot was a really good way to help corral some of our costs. I'm really proud of the call center. I think they do a great job, and they also incur a cost to every call we get, whether that is, hey, don't know how to start a business. I don't know what I'm doing here. Okay, let's take 10 minutes and talk about this. Or where's the button to print this file? That's a silly question. And our call center can do a great job helping it, but the chatbot could also help that for pennies on the transaction. So those three things really drove us to the chatbot.
Awesome. And one of the things that really, there's actually a couple things that really stuck out by that, by what you were saying there. The first one is the business owner that doesn't have time. They're working their normal job. I know that feeling of working a normal job and trying to start a business, on more than one business actually. And it's frustrating. Government is traditionally open from 8 to 5, and there's definitely a time accessibility that we struggle with really across the United States in this space. But from your answer, I mean, it really sounds like it's an accessibility issue. Accessibility can span a very broad area, from just generally being able to access the information as a having any type of disability that may make it difficult, from just being information accessible, and that's or customer service accessible, right? And that is an interesting aspect that I think a lot of people don't think about with business type approach. Everybody just assumes that a business has time to do business during business hours, but that's not the case, especially with the smaller businesses out there, startups, stuff like that. And the second thing is cost effectiveness, and that's obviously a very important topic in government, being responsible with taxpayer money and dollars and whatnot. Could you share, do you have some more like concrete numbers exactly as to how much you've estimated that the chatbot has saved you up to this point?
Yeah, so it's a tricky question to answer, because how do you judge if a chatbot interaction was successful or not? Is it if the person tells you? Is it if they give you information? So first you got to solve that problem. And what we decided with the executive team is that we were going to count a chatbot interaction successful if the person was delivered information, and then at the end of every chatbot interaction, we ask, did this answer your question? So if the chatbot delivered information and the customer didn't say no, then we counted that as a successful interaction. And then there's folks who say, yes, this was helpful. And obviously those are slam dunks. Yep, we were successful with that chatbot interaction. So we take the cost of chatbot for our contract multiplied by, or not multiplied by, but then look at the number of successful transactions, count those as saved phone calls, and then the number of saved phone calls that didn't go to the call center multiplied by our cost per call. And I think in a year, we are north of an estimated $200,000 saved by implementing chatbot.
Wow, that's even if the numbers drop from that actual cost savings, that's still significant value. I mean, wow, $200,000.
Very shocked. I mean, we try to be conservative. I'm poking holes in this every way I can think, because it just seems astronomical. But when I'm presenting data, when I'm talking to it with other folks, everyone seems to validate, yep, you're looking at it in a good way. Even if half of those saved phone calls ended up being phone calls, that's still $100,000 that we've saved in a year, which is just huge. in addition to all the other benefits we talked about, the accessibility, kind of the standard answer, the directional ability around the website. So a lot of benefits.
That actually gives me a good transition. I kind of want to talk about, there's an interesting play right now. So it's pretty much all governments have adopted a website, right? Like every government agency that I know, unless they are so small they can't make it accessible and they don't want to get sued, so they don't put one up. But I've yet to really run into that issue anymore. What is the difference, in your opinion, between using a website versus using a chatbot? What is the differentiator to those two experiences? Tough one.
Yeah, so you're asking me, I'm sorry?
It's a tough one, I know.
It's two different design sets.
Exactly.
Right. If I were to start INBiz from scratch, I'm going to use a different design set for making something that's visually appealing and easily navigable when I'm creating a website, versus when I'm designing a chatbot, I'm focused more or less on the visual aspect because it can only take place in a little box, and more on the conversational aspect. So I'm using tools like sentence length or word choice or hyperlinks. So it's a different design set. Where I think the chatbot shines is I think it can do a lot of the functionality. Not a lot. I mean, we are filling out government forms to start a business, and there's a lot in there. But if we had a user who was willing to, or just desired more of a conversational based approach to starting a business, there's a lot we could put inside of a chatbot that just generates metadata that we can then turn around and flip it to our form, print it out, and all of a sudden the users just have a conversation. That's possible. Probably not likely for our scenario, but that would be the bigger difference. One thing I'd really like to see chatbot move toward is less of the overall, here's the site and here is everything we can talk about, and more of the intelligent flow based on, I just read this and I've got a link for click here for more information. When I click that link, it pops up a chat specifically engaging, talking about what I just read.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So yeah. Actually, Montana's Real ID, I think that was a really good case study of where you use chatbot of, hey, I can help you get around the website, but if you have questions on this specific part of the Real ID, click here, the chatbot's going to give you the details.
Yes, and I guess for probably nobody knows this that's watching this, or very few people, but I was actually the one that designed that website and chatbot experience, and that was really the goal, was to, basically in that case it was, hey, why go to another website? Why take users from one website, or one web page, I should say, to another web page, when we could streamline that whole experience by displaying the information in a chatbot on page instead. And that was the theory, and it did, interestingly enough, the cost savings that was generated from that was determined to be around $200,000 too. So maybe we are onto something with this this number here.
Yeah, maybe. But did I answer your question about some of the differences I see between web pages and chatbot?
Yeah, to move forward a little further in on that, I think you were specifically talking about the design aspect, or the choices that you have to make are completely different. So when you are in the chatbot space, you're thinking more about word choice and that dialogue that you're having, that you're going to have with each citizen or customer, and how that drives your decisions forward. I think, how would you, maybe moving further down that path, how would you, from your personal experience, do you think people consume or absorb information better through a website or through a chatbot experience?
Yeah, chatbot. I wouldn't need long to talk about that. We INBiz is a very content-heavy website. And yeah, I've been involved in a lot of the design conversations just because of my position as customer experience, being over that. But we've been guilty of making design mistakes where we flood the content page with information and words and bullet points in response to customer questions, citizen questions, and we see no change in the number of calls we get or the number of chatbot requests we get. Because despite all the good design around subheaders and bolding words and creating bullet points and links, attention spans continue to be shorter, and even if the information is out there, you're not going to read it. So Chatbot, one of the better design principles and one of the better paths we have tend to be those that are very quick, that aren't, there's a word cap we shoot for. You don't want to have this huge long text to read through when you're chatting with somebody. I think it's a lot more natural for folks who use their phone to text and communicate. They're used to very quick snippets and moving on. But I think the primary hook that engages people and promotes information retention is the fact that you have to interact, that you are waiting on an answer and then responding, and waiting response with a little more skin in the game. So in the future, as chatbots continue to take off, I would see more of a design choice that features sparse text on the website, uses the chatbot to disseminate more of that important information, and then have all of the the necessary guts. For us, it's the forms that you have to fill out, hidden behind login pages, and really having the chatbot kind of direct you there, or some of the sparse pages on the front end of the website direct you there.
Yeah, I think, at least from my experience, I think that's just a smart design path forward. I know we're kind of on this, maybe a tipping point, the cusp of chatbots in government. It still seems like a foreign concept to a lot of people. Most people just don't get it. They just don't get like what a chatbot is, what it does. And there's a lot of different versions out there. The one that we are talking about specifically is goal-oriented chatbot versus, just for some quick information for the listeners, versus a chit-chat chatbot, which is basically the user types out every bit of input, and then the chatbot takes that input and responds. I personally talk about those as glorified search bars, because everyone I've seen has pretty much just pulled up articles, and I don't see the real value in a chit chat bot, at least at this stage of the game. Versus goal-oriented is always, it's an engagement back and forth process. It's always moving towards something, towards solving a problem, moving through a process, or answering a citizen question. So that being said, what role do you see chatbots filling in government in the future? Maybe, and this is even outside of INBiz. Like, if you were just to rise up globally, maybe that's not the right word, but look at the United States and say, what could chatbots, from your experience right now, what could they start solving for government?
Yeah, it's a really cool question. I think so. I think it'd be best to focus on those services that touch everybody first, right? So that could be like the DMV or the Social Security Administration, and then begin to work your way down. I think scheduling is a really cool feature that could be used in chatbot, where, hey, I want to schedule time to go and talk to this person, but it's 11:30 at night. I know my availability, so let's hop on, chat with a bot, and set an appointment so that when I go in, I don't have to wait in line, and I can just meet somebody right away. So schedule 10 minutes or 15 minutes to talk with them. So I think things like that could be helpful. I'd like to see some chatbots move towards that form-based filling out. That's not the right way to say that. Filling out forms via chatbot A lot of times what I see in comments and hear on phone calls is citizens who are, it's easy to fill out a form for the most part, but then you get that one question where it's like, what is a registered agent?
Right.
I don't know what it is. And rather than just trying to write something in, a lot of times citizens get a little freaked out, and then that's when they call, or that's when they start doing research. But if you run a chatbot, you'd be able to say, either enter your answer if you know what it is, or click, what is this? I don't know. Instant response, oh, a registered agent is the person who legally receives your correspondence for your business. Okay, that makes sense. Well, I'll put this person in.
Right.
So I'd like to see stuff like that. Status checks would be huge. For chatbots to be able to take a little bit of information about me, search through databases, and then pull back my status. Folks, even in INBiz, and I know you said globally, but even within INBiz, there's a sense of, have I covered all my bases? Did I do everything right? That can kind of be a vague end. So status lights are huge. If I were to go into a chatbot, in 20 years down the future, when the IRS does this, and say, what are my estimated taxes for this year? Okay, well, Mr. Rainey, we need your social security number. And let's assume I'm comfortable giving a chatbot my social security number, or whatever identifying piece of information. I type that in, and then it searches the IRS database and says, okay, your estimated taxes for this year are da. Or, hey, we received your tax payment on this date, and yep, you're current with the state of Indiana, or actually you owe $20 more because you made an error on line 7. Just some way for me to check dates, check the status that I'm in good standing. Those kind of things would be incredibly helpful, and I think really serve citizens and decrease a lot of the workload that's on customer service centers or front desk personnel who are kind of answering those basic questions that we could be able to automate.
Yeah, it's interesting because really the idea of a chatbot is it's much more citizen centric. It's much more, and that's that engagement factor that every time they engage, they see some information, then they make another engagement. They're bought into the process, to the interaction, and they continue through it. So it just naturally fits for stuff like that, for portals and eligibility checks. And interestingly enough, I'm just sharing this with you, we did build a demo for, I think it was Indiana, child care service, child support, child welfare, and we did, for the demo, we did a eligibility check because their form had some things that needed to be, you had to determine if you were eligible to apply in the first place. And of course, like typical display of information, there was a bunch of bullet points and had all these conditions that the citizen had to figure out for themselves. And then we just took that and automated it into an eligibility check where you just ask for the information, you input it, and it tells you if you're eligible or not. So much simpler.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And that even reminds me something, when Ish came out to visit Indianapolis last year, he even told me about some use cases where they were trying to use chatbots to broaden the intake of women who had been abused, because there was data finding that, hey, folks are more apt to open up to a robot than a person in some cases. Or sometimes it's just more accessible to reach out to a bot and kind of talk about what's going on. And then obviously that gets transferred to a real person or a caseworker who then come out and engage.
Right.
The applications of that, I think, could be massive for the social services sector too. And beyond abuse, it could be linked to, if you have financial trouble, it's embarrassing to talk about, you don't want to bring it up. What government services are there that can begin to provide information, give you targeted feedback, so that by the time you do reach a person, they're not just like getting to know you and they're not just starting that relationship, but they know a little bit about you because you've opened up, which enables them to help you all the much more, give you resources that are specifically designed to help you based on the circumstances that you've shared. And I don't know how much that data hold true or how folks will change you know, in the next 5, 10, 20 years, but interesting to think about. I think it'd be really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. The chatbots, um, they occupy kind of a liminal space, if I can say that. They they feel like a human interaction to a degree, but then they're also, I mean, it's also it's also a robotic element to it. So it's a little disarming, but maybe it still feels like you have that little bit of anonymity, like social media or something. You're not
Yeah.
necessarily face to face. It doesn't feel like you're being pressured in any way. Um, so it's really interesting dynamic to just to. I'm always interested in really the almost the you know the underpinnings of why these things are uh, absorbed or accepted, and why they are so well received. And speaking of well received, how do you roughly know how many people have chatted with your chatbot system to date?
Oh gosh, since the beginning of the year, um, let's see, we average about 2,000 interactions a week. So times 50 is what, 100,000?
Yep.
Yeah, around 100,000, if my math is right.
Hopefully. Otherwise, we don't look like mathematicians.
Um,
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep.
yeah, 50 weeks in a year times.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
Roughly.
So that's how many interactions we've had. Yeah, right. There's 52 weeks in a year, and some weeks are up and down. That's how many interactions we've had. Now, I don't know if, you know, John Smith over at ABC Accounting uses the chatbot every day. You know, I'm not tracking IP addresses or anything like that.
Right.
Interactions that we've got.
Right. That's still, I mean, that's significant for sure. And that does speak to a general willingness to accept this technology at face value, really. There's not, I'm going to actually share the screen real quick, just so people can see um, what this looks like. It's not necessarily you know, a huge call out. It's not over the top. It's a small widget in the bottom left in your case, because you can have it on bottom right or bottom left. At the bottom left, and so I'm just gonna let this play out real quick so everybody can kind of, that has never seen this before, get a quick look at how this works. And 100,000 interactions. I'm not going to say 100,000 people, but 100,000 interactions so far, approximately this year. That really speaks to something ubiquitous. It's easily adopted. People feel comfortable with it. What do you think is the driving force behind that? Why are especially citizens? I mean, because this is a whole different realm where private sector versus public sector is a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
Public sector, I would say, from my experience, citizens use government technology and they typically loathe it. There's a lot of issues, there's a lot of problems, and the return of those issues being fixed and leading to a good experience is slow and cumbersome, at least from my experience working in government. And this is not really to make, you know, light of the work that other vendors are doing, but certainly there's differences up and down in this whole landscape. But one that sticks out to me is our appointment scheduler when I worked for the DMV and it still is just a nightmare. And it's never, every time they push a new change, which takes about 2 months, a month to 2 months to get put together, it gets worse. It never gets better. It always goes downhill.
Uh,
So why then do you think that citizens are so willing to accept this technology? What is it about it that um, one, creates successful outcomes, but two, they're just willing to participate in it?
yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things we built our chatbot around uh, was we had a very specific knowledge base of answers to customer questions. So these are questions that a call center, you receive the call, this is what you're supposed to say. They're very script-oriented call center. Um, so because of that, we were able to transition to a chatbot pretty seamlessly. Now, the way you say something verbally is going to differ from the way you write something out, but there was enough overlap that we were able to make that work. And so when you're on the chatbot, especially the INBiz chatbot, and you saw in the introduction, it even identifies itself like, hey, I am a chatbot, not a person, and I'm here to answer basic questions and guide you around the site. But just being on INBiz kind of we saw a little icon, having that match the look and feel of INBiz overall, says like, this is a trusted government entity. I want to call a representative for INBiz. They are a trusted government and a representative that is going to give me a true answer. And in chatbot, it's written out. I mean, how many times have you wondered like, okay, this is what this official is telling me, or take a knock from the business world. Amazon said they were going to send it to me next day. Can I get that in writing? No, of course you can't. You're customer 92465. But in chatbot, it is in writing. And those are all responses that have been approved by our executive team, by our legal team. And so they know that they're getting a very straight answer. So I think that's one reason why it lends itself to a little bit more trust. Now, when you talk about people who don't like government technology, it can be really hard to separate, do they not like the technology or do they not like the answer we give them? We've had that too. And a lot of times I read through the comments that come through chatbot, and there are times where I look at some of the negative comments and think, oh, you know what, you got a point. It is wonky why our systems work that way and why your filing was rejected. And you know what, look, I know those are decisions made above my head, but I can pass this feedback on because that does seem out of place. And then there are folks who, I didn't sign my paper and you rejected it. I can't do much about that. And then they leave a negative review. So it can be really hard to separate out what is a distaste for technology and the chatbot and the site versus a distaste for the process and how things have been set up. And that's one of the real challenges of chatbots in a government space, but it also gives you a really cool opportunity to see gaps where things could be made a lot more simple. Those get passed up the chain and legislation changes sometimes.
This is actually a fantastic point to talk about is feedback capture, feedback funnel, and overall effectiveness. You really touched on it well, and this is something I kind of geek out about because I feel government just has this problem with collecting feedback, from really listening to their citizen customer experience to especially digital interactions. So one thing that I found, which was really shocking, that with the DMV's chatbot system, is everybody told me everything that was wrong. It almost never had. Well, sometimes it involved the chatbot, but I started receiving comments about every other app that was out there, through other vendors, through the website, just the website, just everything that they disliked or liked was coming through the chatbot, not necessarily the feedback we were looking for in the beginning, but it turned out to be an incredibly valuable asset because now we are understanding the full digital landscape that we were providing and where it was failing. You mentioned where the gaps are. Can you step me through a little bit of your process for capturing feedback and kind of maybe the methodology, but also the thought process as to your approach there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I first need to say that chatbot feedback is one part of many. We've got email channels, we've got customer channels, and then we've got all kinds of metrics that talk about how our website is performing. So it's a vocal channel, but it's one to be taken in consideration with everything else. So at the end of every chatbot interaction, I mentioned there's a question that says, hey, did this answer your question? If the user clicks no, we'll direct them to a place where they can call the call center and get the answer they need. If the user clicks yes, that'll take them to a section that says, is there anything else we can help you with? And then the next screen is, hey, could you please provide some feedback on your chatbot experience today? So we're really clear in saying just how is your chatbot experience? But similarly, we've gotten all kinds of questions or responses to that that are broad reaching. And so what's really fun, and I think when I realized that INBiz customer experience had kind of arrived is when we were able to complete the circle. And I was able to take customer feedback, I was able to take data, and I was able to take that back to the tech team and say, what if we do this? And see some of those changes implemented using their expertise and then using our marketing team's expertise. And that's where the wheel really starts to turn. So a good example of that, our notary page now, there's a good deal of confusion around how the notary process worked. And we saw that in our phone calls, we saw that in the chatbot. And it wasn't that folks were negatively impacted by the chatbot, they were just confused. So we were able to take all of that, do a little bit more research, and then able to create a content page that I think really helped make some of those areas clear. And we've seen a decrease in our notary complaints in some of those calls. We still get it. Nothing's ever going to be made crystal clear. But I think that's a pretty cool case study of how we were able to use customer feedback to directly impact the website. And even now in the background, we're working on changes to continue to improve that. And I have a seat at the table now in the design process because I've got this input to bring forth too from the customer experience side. So we do that. But that is just me, Collin, looking through all the comments. There's other tools we use too. We use the star rating on Chatbot. So we kind of have a gauge of how folks are using it. We can filter out our data by, okay, who gave us 1 stars? What were they trying to accomplish? Who gave us 5 stars? What were they trying to accomplish? And then there's decision trees. Our chatbot, the back end of it looks like a big decision tree. If I can kind of trace which routes are viable and which ones could be improved. And then there is heat map. So I built a little heat map in Excel that shows the most used gambits or bits of conversation that pop up for users. And that's also been a pretty helpful tool. And because then you can start to think, well, how do I reorganize my menus? How do I make this is a really hot gambit. How do I put that further up in the flow?
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are a few of the tools we need to use.
That's really insightful. Just the fact that you mentioned that the chatbot was like that. It almost sounds like it was that missing piece to the puzzle that created the finally like allowed the full cycle of the information on the experience to finally be completed. It's part of a bigger. It's like every tool, right? It's always part of a bigger mechanism or a bigger machine that you're using to determine what's going on. But it's just really interesting to me that it just fills this space that we're looking for. It's this almost like this fourth layer with website or digital experience we're looking for, and we've really been lacking for a long time, because you have your nav bar, you have your search bar, or you can scroll through the website and try and parse through the information yourself. It feels like there was always just one thing missing. And for me personally, I feel like chatbots fill that role, and I think they do a really good job of it. From what you're saying, it sounds that like you agree with that statement as well,
Oh,
that
sure.
they fill this role. So we've gone through a whole I want to get a broad like spectrum of chatbots and discussion. It's been a great discussion, by the way. Thank you so much for sitting down and having this conversation with me. But before
Yeah, you're very welcome.
before we wrap up, I really want to focus in on the INBiz chatbot, and I just want you to hear what your thought process in building this. You had mentioned, there's just all these decision trees that come off of it. How did you go about building this, and what was your thought process, and really just your overall process, like almost your project management with this?
Yeah. Well, one huge leg up I had was that availability of the knowledge base that had the answers, and then 2 years worth of data from the call center saying this is what folks are calling about. I use transaction data from the INBiz site too to identify what the highest transactions are. And then it became a matter of imitating what a conversation is going to look like. Part of that's set in expectations, so that's what you see here on the first screen. Since INBiz is you generate a profile to conduct all the filings, we had a little bit of a limitation. So we first had to, everything was going to depend on if the user had an INBiz profile and could actually access all the things we were going to talk about, or if they couldn't. So we had to move that question way up to the front for folks. So you see the options here, so that's why it is where it is. Then we also, through customer feedback, realized that, hey, some people just want to search and they're just getting a little lost. That doesn't require a login, so let's make that an option too. And then some people are coming to INBiz just because they're trying to research the business and get started. So they don't need to go through all the technical details and understand what a registered agent and business entity report are just yet. They need to be directed to another resource, and so that's why you've got these 4 links here.
So I'm gonna.
I'm
just gonna click on the. I'm just getting started on my business, just to see how this plays out. Keep it moving on the screen a little bit, and keep talking. Don't mind me at all.
Yeah. So I actually really like this option. We had a pretty strong partnership in Indiana with the Small Business Development Center, which is a no-cost pseudo-government agency that provides no-cost, localized business advice to Hoosiers who are trying to start or grow a business. So this was a really cool partnership and kind of filled the gap of folks coming to INBiz saying, okay, I'm ready to open my donut shop. What entity type should I be? We're a government agency. If we start giving out legal advice, that is not something we can do. But let's get you in touch with an organization who is prepared to answer these questions, who is prepared to give you kind of the insights you need. And by the way, they live in your county, they understand the landscape of what you're about to do. So this was a really cool way to connect to a partnership. Because if I'm in that position, I'm not exactly ready for INBiz. There's a lot I can learn, but that's like learning how a motor works and how to change the oil before you understand how the gas pedal and brake work and how to drive a car. So that's the path you just took is kind of more about a partnership that we've been able to develop than anything. Tell you what, I could, if you click return, let's go down another route. I want to talk about business entity reports are the highest transaction on INBiz. It's kind of like a little status report businesses submit to the state every couple of years to say, yep, I'm still in business, nothing's changed. So we're going to pretend that you do have an INBiz account. So go ahead and click yes. And select from the main topic menu to get started. So these are organized in the, specifically in the way we have transactions. So volume of transactions and volume of customer calls influence how these are stacked on top of each other. Now, I would say this is probably too many options. I don't know what the likelihood of somebody scrolling down is. And if I was smart enough to do this, I'd actually like something where it'd be a little bit of a search bar where the user could type in whatever, and then the chatbot picks it up and gets them to the right decision. We tried that when we initially launched Chatbot and got overwhelmingly negative responses to it. A lot of that because folks weren't using keywords. They were typing in, you know, I have a donut shop on 5th and Main.
Right.
Why is my light out? You know, and we can't do anything with that. Sometimes keywords were effective, but overall it was just kind of a mess. So we've actually gotten up, even though it's long and a little cumbersome to get going, we've actually had a much stronger and positive response to this menu-based approach. So start a new business, that's also, you know, kind of the big marketing push of INBiz. Hop on, start your business, get going. So that's why it's at the top. But go ahead and click on business entity reports, if you would. So whether you choose business entity reports or any other kind of those hot topics, you're first going to get a very quick answer to your question. So as I've been on board, we've refined the call center data to show not only how many calls are being answered, but what solution is given. You know, if I'm calling about a business entity report, I could have a lot of sub-questions that isn't encapsulated in the actual question I'm asking. I could be asking how much is a business entity report? How often are they filed? What do they do? What are they for? But all I'm telling the person on the phone is, how do I file my business entity report? What we found from that data is that actually figuring out where to click and file the business entity report was the biggest question beneath the question. And it makes sense. You do it every 2 years. A lot happens in 2 years. If you remember to do it, you just need a little bit of help. So when as a user's gone through this process, they've said, yep, I have an INBiz account. I just need help on business entity reports. So we're prompting them right away with a quick answer. Okay, we're assuming you're trying to file it, so here's how you get there. If you need more information, head to this content page, and that should answer most of your questions as well. If that's the case, great, we're done. Person's been helped, and they can be on their merry way. If not, then we break it down, and they want to keep engaging with the chatbot. Then we break it down into more specified questions. So, as you can see, you can end the chat, which takes you to the star rating. Return to the main topic menu. But go ahead and click, I have other questions about my business entity report. And then it becomes the acknowledgement. Okay, you're talking about your business entity report. How can I help? And these are some of the more common follow-up questions behind the questions that we have answers to.
So basically, so the process is essentially focusing on a main category, and then if the most common issue doesn't apply to them, then you drop them into some subcategories to move forward with their conversation and find more of the specific information they were looking for.
Yes. And if you're kind of building a hierarchy in your mind, I would even put eligibilities first, because the very first question in Chatbot is, do you have an INBiz account? Then it's broad categories that provide a quick answer and a link to more information, and then it's subcategories that have the specified questions. In some of those questions, you may be asked a few more qualifying questions. We try to limit that as much as possible, because then at that point you're getting into 7, 10 interactions and you still don't have any. That's not it's proven to be a great.
Right. If your goal is to deliver quick answers, quick solutions, then you definitely don't want to drag them down in a bunch of interactions. To add on to that though, but if your goal is to step somebody through a complicated process, then you're going to have a lot of interactions, but ultimately much easier than trying to explain that process on a web page, which is kind of, it's kind of in a way what you're doing here is this information, I'm assuming, could probably be found on a web page itself.
Sure.
Yep. But the actual how that information is structured, how the person perceives it, which we talked about a little bit in the beginning, is a whole different experience from a web page versus a chatbot experience. So what is it that you think that is it just the simplicity of it that really allows people to find what they're looking for? Is there another X factor behind it?
I think there is another X factor, and I think it has to do with the depth of questions and the sequence in which you ask them. So picture like a black diamond ski slope, right? It's really steep. And so an instance of that would be me leading off the conversation with this super deep question that requires a lot of thinking and a lot of responding and kind of open-ended stuff. Okay, so that can probably be pretty intimidating. It's like meeting somebody for the first time and saying, what's your take on the death penalty? That's too much. But then you've got a pyramid that's probably more shallow slope, but it's going to take forever to really get into the mix. That's where you're just getting caught up with the chit chat. How are you today? Great. When's your birthday? Great. They keep going on. You almost want a little bit of a circus tent approach. That starts out shallow, gets people hooked, and then goes deep. So, okay, you have an INBiz account. Great. What are you here for? Great. Now let's go deep with your specific question. Now that I've got you hooked or I've got you engaged in the conversation, now we can answer specifically what you're here for. I think that's an X factor for making chatbot useful and increasing that success rate I talked about earlier too, where we have an successful interaction.
That's awesome. I like the circus tent explainer. That is funny on multiple levels, especially since we're talking about government. But
well, yeah,
most citizens, look at government as such, or they have their opinions about it. But really, this is kind of an interesting aside, but I believe there's a communication problem in government, and I don't mean that specifically. Obviously, some government agencies are pretty darn good about their communication, but a vast majority do have a communications problem, specifically in technology, websites and things like implementing chatbots. Really, how are they communicating with their citizens? How are they giving them information? How are they being engaging? And I feel like a lot of those maybe negative stereotypes come from the fact that people feel like there isn't a communication element, or that the communication element is lacking. So then it feels chaotic and hard to accomplish anything. Once again, this is just an aside, so I'm just rambling here. But
no, I'd add to that too. A lot of the, I think, citizen frustrations with government communication is that it's a broad stroke at one size fits all approach. You need to get your license. You go to the DMV. And well, actually, more questions because I'm an immigrant from Zimbabwe and I've got my green card status is here, and I actually don't have a way to get to the DMV. There's all kinds of questions, and gosh, we see this all the time. There's all kinds of specific business scenarios that we don't have a way to address. And certainly there's cost factors with here. You got to hit, you try to answer the 80% of user questions because that takes 20% of the work. and the remaining ones. But that's also why we have a multifaceted customer care approach. We're trying to hit you with the chatbot to be more specified. But man, if you are a dissolved farm that sells potatoes to Idaho that is incorporated in Switzerland, you got to talk to somebody. Like, we're not going to use a chatbot to try to figure that out.
Right. So it's about a multifaceted approach, and I feel like congrats to Indiana in the work you're doing for stepping into that arena and increasing conversation or communications and looking for these kind of, even though it's in a box, these out of the box solutions for increasing this communication with citizens. I think me personally, as I just went on my quick tangent there, I think communication it's one of those fundamental factors that just keeps getting overlooked. Like word choice, just word choice on a website is so important. But if you go to a lot of government websites, it reads like an employee wrote the website for other employees to find information, not for the citizen to find information. Acronyms, for example, jargon,
Right.
very technical terms, and everybody's dialing that phone number and saying, "What is this thing? I don't even get this."
Yeah.
So thank you for the work you're doing. I think we're about at time. I don't want to go too much farther and make this too long, but it's been really awesome talking to you. Your insights were fascinating and really got me thinking. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's been a fun project. INBiz, I mean, the Secretary of State's office wants to be good communicators, and they put their money where their mouth is by investing in projects like this. And I know I've looked to the work you've done, and you've been an instrumental part of this as well. As we've almost become technological pen pals over the past couple of years getting this together. So I enjoy working with you, and I'm excited to see where Sky Civic's going.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Well, have a good rest of your day. And with that, we'll sign off. And until the next time, see you later.
Sounds good. Thanks, Levi.
Thank you.